This happened over a decade ago, but even now the memory creeps back like a shadow slipping through the cracks of my mind. It waits until I'm alone, until the world is still, and then it whispers, reminding me just how close I came to something I don't even want to name. I was 12 years old, living in a small, quiet town in Oklahoma. The kind of place where everyone waved from their porches and kids played in yards without fences. Our neighborhood was spread out, houses separated by long stretches of woods that whispered with every breeze. Isolation was normal out here. It felt peaceful, until that day when it became terrifying. It was early fall. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the sun still burned warm in the afternoons. My grandma picked me up from school like always and dropped me off at home around 3 p.m. It was my first year staying home alone after school, a rite of passage. Just me in the house until my dad got home at 4:30 and mom a little after. But that day, both of them were delayed. Dad wouldn't be home until after 7, and mom had parent-teacher conferences that would keep her at school until 8. I wasn't worried. It was bright out. I was 12, and Minecraft with my friend Seth was calling. I ran upstairs, turned on the Xbox 360, and settled into the warm, glowing comfort of a pixelated world. Seth and I were building an underground fortress, laughing and making plans for lava traps. Everything felt normal, safe, until I heard it. A car door, loud, sharp, final. It echoed through the stillness of the house like a gunshot. I froze. Our upstairs windows overlooked the driveway. I got up, controller in hand, mic still on, and peeked out the blinds. A red truck was in our driveway, but not parked normally. It was crooked, half on the lawn, as if the driver had swerved in without a second thought. The kind of parking that says, "I won't be here long." My stomach tightened. A man stepped out. Heavy camo hoodie pulled tight, despite the warm September air. A baseball cap sat low over his eyes, hiding most of his face. He moved like he wasn't in a rush, like he belonged there. He walked up to the front door. I told Seth. Tried to sound casual. Maybe it was a delivery guy, maybe a friend of Dad's. But my voice cracked. I knew better. My dad would have said if someone was stopping by. Then came the knock. One, then another. Slow and deliberate. I moved to another window just in time to see him turn and walk away from the door. A wave of relief washed over me until he didn't go back to his truck. He walked past it, straight to the side garage door, and tried the handle. My heart dropped. "He's trying to get in," I whispered to Seth with trembling voice. That door, sometimes we forgot to lock it. That day we hadn't. He moved on, calm and controlled, like he was just checking off a list. Next, the back of the house. I dropped my headset. Slowly crept downstairs, every creak of the floor sounding like a scream. I stayed low, pressed against the wall, eyes locked on the living room windows. I couldn't see him, but I heard him. The click of the back door handle, followed by a heavy thud. A tool? A rock? A crowbar? It wasn't just a noise, it was intent. Someone trying to get in. I wanted to run and call someone, but I didn't have a phone. The only one we had was mounted in the kitchen, right in view of the living room windows. If he was watching, I'd be a clear target. So I stayed frozen. My heart pounded in my ears. My breath caught in my throat, and then silence. I peeked around the corner. The back porch was empty. I bolted upstairs, snatched my headset, and told Seth everything. My voice cracked with panic. Then we both heard it, another car door. I rushed back to the window. The man was in the truck now, just sitting there, watching the house, motionless, like he was thinking, calculating. That's when I saw what was in the bed of the truck, a crowbar and a shovel. He wasn't a thief. He didn't come for things. He sat there for what felt like an eternity, then slowly backed out and drove away. I tried to get a look at his license plate, but the angle made it impossible, like he'd parked that way on purpose. I didn't move until he was completely out of sight. Once the truck was gone, I crept downstairs to the back door. I needed to see what had made that sound. And that's when I knew he hadn't just tried, he had planned. The welcome mat had been shoved aside. The large potted plants that flanked the door had been moved deliberately, as if someone had searched beneath them. I checked the front porch too. Same thing. Pots pushed aside and soil spilled. He was looking for a key, and we had one. A spare key which is hidden under a small pot just inches from where he had searched. He had almost found it. I called my dad the moment I felt safe enough to move. When he got home, he brought the police. I told them everything. The red truck, the man, the crowbar, the shovel. I described the clothing, the way he moved, how he never once hesitated. He never came back. But sometimes I still see that truck, hear the knock, feel the silence that followed, because people like him don't come to steal. They come to enter, quietly, calmly, like they already belong inside. And that kind of person doesn't come for things. They come for people. As far as I remember, I've always been fascinated about road trips ever since I was little. The factor of such definitely came from my dad, who once worked as a truck driver and would often bring me along with him. Now being grown up and all, those sweet memories eventually faded along with time. The last time I graduated was nearly a decade ago. All the jobs that I took were merely a part of an inconsistent, unpleasant career that barely supported my financial burden. Being nearly stuck in a dilemma, I finally decided that it was time I find a stable career with a job that I actually enjoy. Fast forward to a few months after, I couldn't be much happier to have finally possessed a competent truck driver's license after digging out my remaining money for the lessons. The moment I took hold of it, I did not waste time to seek for companies that would hire me. It took some quick browsing before I found a small, unnoticed company that offered good bucks. It introduced itself as a meat company and desperately needed new drivers as demands were increasing lately. I partook in an interview and sure enough, secured the job since they were unexpectedly that desperate. My orientation was right on the next day. Prior to it, my new boss ordered me to sign some terms and contracts and handed me a set of documents, which he described it as the company's rules and regulation. Since the goods I transport are fresh meats, it means that I had to drive midnight carrying them from the factory to its destination before morning for the public to purchase and consume. The orientation went smoothly, and I quickly adapted to the lifestyle of a trucker within days. During my first few days as an amateur, I was accompanied by my supervisor, who observed my driving. He told me that it was a protocol for a driver to be accompanied along the ride, but most of the time I would have to be alone due to worker shortages. Therefore, driving solo wouldn't be an uncommon thing in this company. Well, it was pretty awesome driving around late night, enjoying the night view, although I still needed to arrive on time. Other than that, I was coping with the job really well. One usual night, as I arrived to my company to start my job, I was greeted by my slumbery boss, who told me that I needed to handle today's delivery alone. I glared at him momentarily before nodding and walked toward the six-wheeled rigid fridge truck that I've been working on. It was my first ever solo. The engine of the truck roared alive as I turned the key forward. The headlights illuminated the wall in front of me with such brightness that I had to look away momentarily. Next thing, I shifted the gear and drove towards the loading bay as I was taught. The ramp gradually opened as I pressed one of the buttons, exposing cool nitrogen gas out into the already cold atmosphere. Sounds of rumbling faded in as a forklift carrying meat packages unloaded into the container, creating bangs and impacts which shook the truck and me inside of it. As soon as I heard a familiar tap pattern, I instantly recognized it as a signal and shut the ramp close. It wouldn't take long before I exited the factory and took the main road. The GPS voice made an indistinguishable announcement. Your journey to Joe's Meat Market, Oregon is 179 miles northwest. Have a safe drive. Initially, I drove through residential areas before passing by farms and factories. It wasn't until I had to make a turn into a smaller road which would cover the majority of my trip. The streetlights weren't well lit, which gave the road a gloomy appearance. As I advanced for 30 miles, streetlights no longer cover the roads, and all that was left illuminated was the headlight of my truck, the dashboard, and the glittering stars across the sky, and on occasion, high beam lights from passing cars. All around me were lush, thick forests, making the surrounding extra darker. The truck's engine's vibration as it cruised down the road shook my body throughout the drive. Staring at the illuminated road, I couldn't stop myself from thinking the set of special rules that I have read earlier. Special rules. In this section of rules, it is obligatory for every worker to abide every rules that were listed. Failure to do so will almost guarantee a life-threatening hazard. This version covers special rules for long-haul truck drivers. Rule number 1. As you are operating as a night shift driver, it is obligatory to keep the headlights on at all times, especially on dark roads, even when your truck is stationary. This might sound simple, but extremely important for safety reasons. As I recalled such rule, I wondered why was it in the special list when it was a literal common sense in the real world. I took a turn at a sharp corner and accelerated the truck. As I stepped on the pedal, I recalled the second rule. Rule number 2, if you are driving in a remote area, abide the traffic rules if there are vehicles nearby. However, if you are completely alone, try to cruise at a higher speed as to quickly avoid unwanted visitors. The last phrase sent chills down my spine. What the hell was a visitor? I mean, who wants anything from a meat truck? That was when I jerked on the brake pedal in a sudden as a figure quickly approached ahead of me. It was a person who seemed lost. Thinking of the following rule, I did not stop the truck and instead swerved and overtook him. Rule number 3, never allow anybody to ride on the truck, even stranded or lost people. Failure to do so will result in an immediate disqualification from this company if you're lucky enough not to fall into its trap. Staring at the rear view mirror in the dashboard camera, I couldn't help myself but curse under my breath. Why not? This was getting frustrating. Just a few minutes after the incident, a yellow indicator popped out on the dashboard. Something I really wish hadn't happened to me right now. The truck's engine compartment began filling with smoke, and traces of it escaped through the crack of the hood, forcing me to halt the truck. Apparently, luck couldn't get any worse as the engine overheated in the middle of a creepy forest. Water coolant was running low, and so I stepped out of the truck to grab the water jerry. As I opened the door, a cool breeze blew over my body, sending chills within my body. I embraced myself and shone the torchlight towards where I was facing. I clumsily waddled to the side of the truck, both legs still cramped from the tedious driving. Then I pulled a trigger, which opened the hood of the truck. I could feel the heat radiating onto my body from the overheated engine. I took a quick break before pouring some water into the coolant tank. I left the hood open for some time while I chilled inside the cabin. It was then that I realized my delivery had to be inevitably delayed. It took almost half an hour for me to be confident enough to continue the journey. As I stepped outwards again to shut the hood, something bizarre happened. The same guy that I overtook a while ago appeared behind my truck. Completely dumbfounded but somehow expecting it, I glanced towards him as he slowly approached me. He was in his 40s, had brown hair and appeared to be dirty and torn, and looked emotionless. In a deep, monotone voice, he asked, "Why did you not stop just now?" I hesitated for a while before replying, "Sorry, but company doesn't allow us to pick up strangers." "In the middle of nowhere, and you think it's okay for me to be alone here?" "Look, I'm sorry," I stuttered, but a car suddenly drove past us, its high beam distracting my view on that guy. I covered my eye with my arm. As I put my hand down, the guy seemed to be nowhere, except he was now at my right side. My heartbeat skipped, but I remained in composure. "What are you waiting for? I'm not letting you go this time." His face began to show irritation. "All right, just stay here while I get things done." I walked to the front of the truck to shut the hood, all while shivering from the sudden change of aura that this guy gave. I quickly stepped into the cabin and instinctively shut the door, barricading myself from the man outside, and activated the locks. The click on the door as it locked was something I anticipated so much that it gave me a quick sigh of relief. The man appeared beside me, now knocking on the door, probably wondering why I locked myself in, or maybe not. My heartbeat raced as I rushed for the keys and ignited the engine. The rumbling came again, but I was so grateful that I could feel it again. I instantly shifted to first gear and accelerated ahead. The guy's yell and knocking was suppressed by the loud diesel engine, but I could already imagine him cursing as he banged on the truck. As the truck gained speed, the banging shifted all the way to the back of the truck, and then came silence. That was when I heard a bone-chilling scream. That was not a human scream. It sounded too unearthly. My primal instinct could sense evil behind the deafening roar. I glanced at the rear of my truck only to visualize a traumatizing silhouette which was now chasing me. From I could see it stood 6 feet tall, even with all 4 of its legs. Its appearance was too dark, but I could definitely notice a darker patch of eyes staring into my side mirror, right into my soul, its serrated row of teeth hungry for flesh. The figure approached rapidly as the truck's rear light illuminated the unearthly creature in red. I could hear bangs on the side of the truck. It was attempting to breach the container. I brake-checked unexpectedly, making the creature unable to react in time and tumbling onto the asphalt. I accelerated harder this time and fled the scene. That was when another rule popped into my memory. Rule number 4. If something is following you, do not let them catch up to you. Do your best to survive. Something? Is that creature the something they're referring to? I tried to connect the dots while simultaneously focusing on the road. Adrenaline was rushing endlessly when all of a sudden, a horde of the similar creature flanked from the side of the road. My jaw dropped as I was flabbergasted by the sudden attack. I swerved to avoid them and hit one of them. I felt a huge crash, but the truck kept on going. Series of bangs and clangs reverberated the truck's chassis as the container was constantly ambushed mercilessly by the creatures. Couldn't think much of a solution as they gradually broke in. I couldn't thank my luck more as a tunnel approached in front. Taking this opportunity, I swerved right and took down 3 to 4 of these creatures off the truck. I could hear the splatter noise as they were brutally crushed between the truck and the tunnel. I did the same at the left side of the truck as I crossed the double line and skidded against the tunnel. The creatures at the other side were also ruthlessly obliterated. The tunnel ended as the last creature's body laid onto the ground from the devastating blow. I celebrated momentarily, punching the steering wheel as soon as I exited the tunnel. I drove for another 5 miles, still high on adrenaline. I did not notice the sharp curve in front of me, and the massive truck battered into the woods as I couldn't react in time. The truck was too fast. I was running for my life. The truck came to a complete halt, jolting me forward like a dummy rag doll. I cursed under my breath. I just thanked that my seatbelt saved my ass. I shifted into reverse gear, but horror dreaded upon me as I realized that the RPM was at its maximum. This only meant one thing. The wheels were stuck. Fuck! I screamed in panic and in pain. I scanned around me. No vehicles were around. I was completely left alone. I felt hopeless by then. I already called my boss, and he promised to send a tow truck as quick as possible. I hid in my truck for about 15 minutes now. I don't think they'll ever make it. Reason so, I could hear the creatures from a mile away now approaching at an alarming rate. I hadn't seen Mike in a few months. He'd been buried in work, and our usual weekend nights out had about disappeared. Then he called me on a Thursday and invited me over for drinks. I jumped at the invite, but took note of how depressed he sounded on the phone. By the time I got there, Mike had already started drinking and was slurring his words. A dark cloud seemed to hover over him, which got worse as we drank. I finally asked what had been going on with him. Mike turned darker and afraid and said it had to do with work. I never really knew what Mike did for a living. I did know he worked for the city in the tech department and was involved with the CCTV surveillance network, but I never knew what his day-to-day operations were, which he began to describe in detail. Mike explained there were thousands of cameras scattered throughout the downtown core, outlying neighborhoods and well into the suburbs of our 1 million-plus city. His responsibility was to categorize and archive all the incoming footage. Most of the footage went into very general classifications and were saved in hard drive farms and identified with a lengthy combination of numbers and letters for categorical archiving. They were truly meant to be forgotten about. It was an expansive task, but Mike designed and built an AI screening program that detected common patterns in footage, then sectioned out anomalous behavior for review. The vast majority wasn't noteworthy, something like 99.99%. Then there was the 0.01%, The car accidents, assaults, swarmings, rapes, abductions, murders. Those went into a special archive for use in criminal investigations. And then there was the 0.001%. They were held in a classified archive and contained footage capturing events that for all accounts were unexplainable. This was called the Tartarus Archive. I looked up the word Tartarus after and discovered it was one of the darkest, deepest prisons from Greek mythology. It was said that if you dropped an anvil from heaven, it would take 7 days for it to reach the earth. It would take another 7 days for the anvil to reach Tartarus. It was the place you sent titans when there was nowhere else that could contain them. When Sisyphus was condemned to an eternity of futility and frustration with a large boulder and a mountain slope, that punishment was carried out in Tartarus. As it turned out, the name was quite fitting to the archive's growing contents. Some footage could be simplified to strange optical anomalies in the camera and coincidences of light or crackheads on a bender through the subway systems, and other footage, though, defied logic. The others are what captured Mike's mind that evening. He'd been breaking protocol and bringing hard drives home at night. In fact, he'd been splicing the footage together, capturing and compiling repeat aberrations and editing them into linear sequences. Mike wanted to show me some. It wasn't in a bragging or showing off kind of way. It felt more like the sharing of a heavy burden kind of way. I asked if showing me would get him in trouble, but he waved the idea away. I said, yeah, obviously I want to see what's going on in my city. Mike led me into his workroom, where he had monitors and towers and piles of externals set up. We sat down and he skimmed through some drives nervously. Then he landed on one. Mike told me this anomaly was codenamed Lincoln Spectre. He pressed play. On the largest screen, black and white footage started up, showing Lincoln Avenue, one of our less attractive downtown streets, at 3 a.m. The camera angle showed the length of Lincoln Ave. As it led into the downtown core, the street appeared empty and quiet. From a side road, a woman emerged, walking towards the camera. As she approached the intersection, she turned over her shoulder and appeared to scream. The woman took off, sprinting past the camera, which cut to a new, wider angle from another camera across the street. We watched the woman running frantically, seemingly being chased, but she was the only one on the street. There was no one else anywhere around her. The woman kept screaming as she ran, and the cameras kept following, cutting between different CCTV angles. We watched as the woman was chased into the middle of an empty intersection. She fell, then cowered, as if something massive was standing over her. The woman's neck stiffened, and she began to levitate off the ground. Her body looked like a rag doll as something lifted her by the throat until she was floating, a dozen feet above the road, in the middle of the intersection. Then the woman's head snapped to the left, and her body fell back to the ground. The video ended and went black. I sat shocked. Mike saw my expression and said, "You ain't seen nothing yet." I asked if that was real, if what I saw was unaltered, was raw footage. Mike said all he'd done was put the clips together. None of the content had been touched. He told me he found out the incident ended up being described as a hit and run, and the case was left figuratively open for more evidence to amass, which it never would. The department kept the footage hidden, claiming it was a camera malfunction. No one outside of Mike and his boss had seen the video of how the poor woman actually died. I started to understand the air of somberness Mike was carrying around. Mike started the next video. This one was codenamed Black Crab and was much longer than the previous one. It started in the subway systems at the underground Walkley station, shortly after closing up for the night. Walkley was the last stop on the route, and the exterior was shouldered by a new housing development on one side and untouched forest and swampland on the other. The camera was pointed down along the subway platform on the east side and showed its entire length with benches and garbage cans populating it. At the far end, the tunnel was filled with darkness. The lights on the platform shut off and the station went dark. The camera switched to night vision and everything became visible again. My eyes trained on the platform, waiting for something to happen. Finally, there was movement. It was coming from the tunnel. It was difficult to identify what exactly it was at first, as its movements were strange and the footage was grainy. but it got closer to the camera and I got a better look. It resembled a human, a man, but he was walking on his hands and feet, upside down, with his back arched and his stomach pointed to the ceiling. He had long dark hair that dragged along the ground, and he wore tattered layers of old jackets and torn pants. He moved like a crab, jerkily yet quickly and easily as he made his way to the staircase. The footage cut to a new camera in the dark hallway leading to the stairs out of the station. We watched the crab walker claw up 2 steps at a time and then crawl over the turnstiles and towards the exit. The footage cut again, now showing the exterior of the station entrance. The crab walker squeezed and twisted and maneuvered his body through the locked and closed entrance gate. It looked impossible to accomplish, but he did it. Once outside, the crab walker eyed his surroundings before skittering off towards the woods and disappearing. The footage cut to an hour later and revealed the crab walker reappearing from the woods. He was dragging a small animal by the tail in his teeth. The animal looked like a cat. The crab walker squeezed back through the gate, crawled through the station, and disappeared into the subway tunnel. Again, Mike saw my expression and told me there was more. He showed me the length of the video, which was over an hour long. Mike had compiled over 20 sequences of the crab walker creeping out of the subway station and into the woods. Mike skimmed through this video towards the end, and we watched the crab walker come out of a sewer in a downtown alleyway. It crawled over to a pile of garbage bags and cardboard boxes. Then it jumped into them, and some kind of vicious frenzy ensued. There was someone else in the pile of garbage. Hands and feet thrashed about as they were struggling for their life. Then the movement stopped and the hands and feet went still. The crab walker's body moved jerkily about, but I couldn't see what was happening because of the darkness and all the garbage bags and boxes obscuring the camera's view. Mike leaned over to me and whispered that the crab walker was eating a homeless man. This caused a criminal investigation as the dead body was found mutilated and festering in the open alleyway. Mike followed up on the inquiry. What he discovered was the crab walker was who authorities believed to be a man named David Fletcher. Decades ago, David had been a prominent lawyer with a family. One Christmas, there was a house fire, and his wife and kids were killed in the blaze. It was David's fault. He lost everything, including his mind. Everyone has a breaking point, whether they know it or not. A place where they bend too far and then snap. David found his. Family and friends described his descent as nightmarish. David lived on the streets, became addicted to drugs, and tumbled into mental illness. The last anyone knew of him was from 10 years prior. He'd thrown himself in front of a subway at the Walkley station, and no one heard from or saw him again. It appeared that, somehow, David had survived the subway hit. His back had broken and healed strangely, causing him to move the way he did. He'd adapted to the new posture and lived in the darkness of the subway tunnels, finding sustenance from drain water and the wild animals he caught. That was what Mike found out, at least. But then he said, that was just the answer the investigators gave in Discovery. Who knows where the truth lay? Mike said there was always an answer for the videos he saw. Whether the answers were true or not, no one knew. But the ones that had to become public all needed explanations, however absurd. Either way, David was never found and didn't reappear on the subway footage. Mike plugged a new hard drive in, he poured a fresh drink, and told me this was the one that was troubling him. The file was codenamed Cloud Mirror. I wasn't sure I wanted to see it, but before I could object, Mike pressed play. All the monitors lit up with footage from different intersections downtown, on the exact date and time as each other. There were 5 in total. The streets on each screen were empty and quiet, no cars or people. Suddenly, at the exact same time in the center of the intersections, a small glow pulsed into existence. It was some kind of orb, roughly the size of a bowling ball. The streetlights around it pulsed with energy waves as the orb grew larger. It grew to the size of a beach ball. Then it flashed out. The streetlights went back to normal, and the intersection was as lifeless as it was before. I asked Mike what they were. He told me he had gigs of footage of the orbs and had watched them repeatedly. He didn't know what they were at first, then they started to change. Mike clicked onto the next video. Again, the 5 monitors lit up with the same intersections and time of night, but several weeks later. The streetlights glowed and pulsed, and an orb manifested into existence again. It grew to its beach ball size, but then altered its surface and glow. Something gas-like replaced it, growing outward into a couch-sized cloud of dark gray. One of the cameras was closer, so I got to see the small clouds in detail. It looked like a volcanic eruption wrapping around itself. They were large, constantly morphing blobs that curled outward from a glowing center, resembling a mantle bulb, fractal as a gaseous-based organism. It was fascinating to see them floating in the middle of the street, so alien to our roads and stoplights and street lamps. Then they began to move, gliding down empty roads. The cameras cut to different angles, following the clouds on some unknown path, zigging and zagging onto new streets and through alleyways. Then they'd stop. The clouds hovered in the center of their intersection. They'd lower to ground level, standing straight up like a large coffin. Holding rigid to the shape, their exteriors continued to shift and mold together like magnets made of smoke. Something on one of the monitors caught my eye. Down the street, people appeared. They'd seen the cloud and were walking towards it. The group looked drunk and fascinated by the floating entity. So much so, they were approaching it. As they did, the cloud became brighter. The street lamps around it pulsed. The group were in some kind of trance, staring into the morphing blob. One of the group, a guy, stared into it like a zombie, then walked right into the cloud and disappeared. None of the group tried to stop him. Instead, another one followed him in, and another, and another. All 5 members of the group disappeared in the cloud. Then they reappeared, one at a time. The guy first, then in the order they went in. Only, they weren't stumbling and boisterous and drunk now. They were walking upright, using minimal movements. They formed in a perfect 5-person circle for several seconds over quick words, then turned and all went in separate directions. Their strides, arm swings, and speed all matched. Another monitor showed a similar situation with a larger group of people, lost in reverie as they marched one after another into the cloud. Each monitor showed the same thing now, people entering the clouds and coming back out. Different. Mike stopped the video. I asked him if he'd shown this to anyone else. He said he hadn't, not even to his one boss, which was a problem, because he had a meeting with his boss in the morning to discuss the missing footage. I asked why he didn't show the footage to his boss. This footage seemed more than serious. People were being replaced by something. Mike sighed and put a new video on. The main monitor lit up and showed a new downtown street. The date was from earlier this week. One of the clouds was floating in the intersection. A middle-aged couple were walking nearby, the husband with a slight limp in his right leg. The couple saw the cloud and were sucked in by its aura. They approached it, eyes wide and mouths open. Both the husband and wife entered the cloud and disappeared. After a moment, they reappeared. The husband's limp was gone. Mike turned to me and said, "That was my boss and his wife.